Let's take an opportunity right now, my friends, to be joined by someone who has been hard at work with a great team of people at AntiWarDotCom. They've been working, I don't even know, they must have to add hours to the day to expose some of the massive hypocrisy and dangerous warmongering and bloodthirstiness of these people, plus discussing freedom of speech and getting the word out to people. Angela Keaton of AntiWarDotCom is joining us, and she is, as we mentioned, this is a great, easy way for people to join us when they are working so hard. She's on the line with us by phone. Angela, how are you? And welcome to the program.
Fine. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for asking me to do that. I'm still a little nervous about being on the air, but I'm getting better.
Well, it's not a problem for us over here because you sound crystal clear, and the audience has been anticipating it. We've been hearing from people. No, I'm just making up. They
No, I really have to start out by saying thank you for all the coverage you give us, and thank you for always promoting the work and what we're doing and the message of AntiWar.com. And I'm just so glad I can come in, because I wanted to mention a few things and make sure that everybody who enjoys the website is also enjoying our podcasts and all of our social networking. We have so much more of it now than we used to. This might be the first full year where we have basically a presence everywhere.
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of work that you do. Not only the whole team writing articles. I have up in front of me Dave's article from a little bit earlier today about the UK's renewed ban on the Palestine action over in England. Freedom of speech just crushed by them. But also the videos and podcasts that people are doing, as you and I discussed in text, Angela. I had nothing but wonderful opportunities to get information from Dave and from Kyle on his show. Why don't you tell people a little bit about how long Antiwar has been around, and then let's talk about some of the areas, some of the vectors by which people can sort of soak up the information from Antiwar.
30 years. We've been since Eric Garris bought the domain AntiWar.com. AntiWar.com was founded by 4 libertarians, including 2 very important acolytes and activists / writers / thinkers, Eric Garris and Justin Armando. But this is very Rothbard. And if you go back enough, of course, there's that weird Ayn Rand beginning, because it usually begins there. But yes, AntiWar.com is an absolute. It's a blessing to work there. It truly is. We get to think about the worst things every day and get to do something about them. So that's a really, really great and privileged position.
And you know, Angela, I was mentioning it last night that there are certain people who never seem to become fatigued in pursuing these stories. And, you know, there's a lot of darkness here. We're talking about, you know, I'll be watching Dave and he'll be, you know, you can tell that Dave is affected by the videos of you know, children being killed and buildings being destroyed, and, you know, just the terrible slaughter in Gaza, or just the evil and deceptiveness of so many of these people. And yet there's a resilience in, you know, perhaps I know Dave is a very strong Catholic and his belief in God is very strong. And there's something else too, a sort of a punk rock attitude of people. We're in the mosh pit. And I mentioned this on the show last night. People ask me, you know, how do you keep going on this stuff with so much energy? I was like, I don't know. I'm just one of those people. I just do it. And you seem to have the same attitude, and you were formed by people who have that attitude, it seems.
Yes. And it's a great thing. And remember, it's not happening to us. It's just something that we are reporting on. I mean, if it were happening, I mean, I know people talk a lot about empathy or sympathy, and they confuse the two sometimes. There's no possible way I could imagine the horror that's happening in Gaza in my own life. It's sympathy rather than empathy, because most of it's unimaginable. And given that, it's the duty of people who have the privilege of living under the empire. Not that it's that great to be an American citizen. I mean, I'm hardly championing the great U.S. government, but we are in a position where we can say something. And we've been saying something, you, me, and many of our friends and allies have been saying the same things for a long time, and many libertarians who've come and gone. And we know we were right. I mean, even if we didn't exactly save the world on time, we at least have been proven right again and again.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And one of the things I think is interesting about this, Angela, is for example, I was mentioning how many years ago I was having dinner with Glenn Jacobs, and we were out in a restaurant in just outside of LA. And it was around maybe 2010, just before the whole red line thing with Syria under the Obama administration, and the bogus story about the chemical weapons attacks and things. And a man approached us. The man who managed the restaurant was the manager of the restaurant. He came from the Middle East. He wasn't even from Syria. I don't know where he was from. I think he might have been from Turkey. And he said that they're going to try to overthrow Assad. And at that time, I had become aware of, for example, the Russians and the Chinese government dropping a lot of their long-term U.S. debt instruments around 2009 because of the Obama American Recovery Act and the inflationary pressures and stresses on the U.S. dollar. And they were starting to collect more gold. The Germans were asking for the repatriation of their gold from the Fed, and the Fed was delaying it, saying, "Oh, we don't have it. What happened to it? It just got vaporized. I don't know where it went." And it was interesting because on an intellectual level, I didn't know enough about it. So I started to research it, and then I started to see the patterns. I said, and I started to realize they're trying to isolate Russian energy exports. Then they overthrew Yanukovych in late 2013, early 2014. We saw the whole Jeffrey Pyatt, Victoria Nuland, F the EU, and the larger conversation there where they talked about working with Ole Tyahnybach and the Sloboda Party, the Nazis. Then we saw the meetings with them. I mean, literally on the stage with a neo-Nazi, on the stage with Tyahnybach, people like Chris Murphy and John McCain and Amy Klobuchar. And so you start to see, like, wow, there are some really dark forces here that I'm starting to look into. And I haven't mentioned this to you, but I'll mention it right now, Angela. And I mentioned this to a few other folks on the show before, but a buddy of mine worked for Eric Holder in the Obama administration. And he actually played bass for G.G. Allen, the punker, years ago when we were teenagers. And he ended up working for Holder. He left very quickly just before the Fast and Furious imbroglio. And he came up to me. We were having dinner with a group of old high school friends. And this is late 2013, December. So before the official Maidan coup happened. And he said, "Hey, where are you getting your information about Ukraine?" And I said, "Well, I'm just researching and so on." And he said, "Well, you're right. And there's a lot more." And so then I started to watch what was going on in Syria. I started to watch how they had already connected with al-Jilani and the al-Nusra Front. And so a lot of these names started to become much more familiar to me. And then once I found other people who were on familiar ground, whether it was, obviously Scott Horton, or it was, people like Dave, or, other folks at AntiWar, Kyle's talking about these things, you start to say, okay, there are people who know the stuff I know, and there aren't that many people out there. And I don't know how you have succeeded in growing the way you've grown, but I think a lot of people are responding to your message, Angela. And I know that if people hear you now, if they're listening to the podcast later, I hope they'll go over to you and check out what you do. Again, can you mention some of the areas where people can find the shows, and then talk to us about a couple of the things that maybe you're watching yourself at AntiWar that aren't getting a lot of publicity? Tell us again. We're talking Kyle, we're talking Dave, and of course, many guest appearances. Kyle's on vacation this week, and Karen Kwiatkowski's filling in for him, right?
Yes, and I want to make sure that people knew that, so people continue to watch the show. Kyle's show grows by leaps and bounds every day for a reason. It's so good. But I want to back all the way up to you talking about Assad. Everything you really need to know about Syria, Lebanon, and that particular part of Levant, just look up Jason Ditz on AntiWarDotCom. Jason puts out material every day. He puts out so much material that I basically made an entire feed for him on the Blue Ski, or whatever the kids are calling it. The thing with the blue, the thing that's Jack Dorsey's other project that he's probably already abandoned because he, gets bored, probably. So that one. But Jason has all that information all the time. I would just go there to news.antiwar.com and hit on every one of Jason's articles. And So Kyle does the Kyle Ann's Alone show, and he also used to do a show called Conflict of Interest with Connor Freeman and Will Porter. That was an amazing show of his own, but that's sort of been retired, and now Kyle's doing his own interview show. He has a series of regulars. It's very good commentary. It's short and quick. It's right in drive time on the East Coast, so you turn it on, you're leaving the parking lot, and you watch it. It's about 4:45 at Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. There's also special editions and occasional time changes, but he is on Twitter, and you can know all the podcasts that we put out via Antiwar News. Our main Twitter account is AntiWarCom, and that is just straight up every news article we do every day, along with our original opinion pieces and the blog entries. Facebook, we have all kinds of interesting things, and a lot of what I call the B-sides, articles that are related to things we talk about on AntiWar.com on the Facebook page. This summer we're experimenting again with adding just more and more, so people are just getting, instead of going directly to the site, they'll go through their favorite social media accounts. I know it sounds late time to do this, but there's so much material, and it takes such a long time to build up the following when a lot of your material isn't particularly pleasant.
That's
There's
true.
A lot of cat tippers,
Yeah, that's so true, so true. And I like to be able to watch, because the ability of people to be able to get the news out in that breaking form, that solid 20, 23, 24 minutes, you get the information. And these shows are coming from people like Kyle, like Dave. And when Dave does the news at night, you can read the articles, but watching Dave, he can expand on these things, or Kyle can expand on these things with quick memories. Like I just brought up that memory about the man sitting there telling us they were going to try to overthrow Assad. And then, some of the information that I was already aware of regarding al-Jilani and the al-Nusra Front and things like that. And having that extra context, I think, is extremely important. And even people who are sort of neophytes to this, after a few months of reading it, you begin to become more conversant with the terminology, and you begin to see, and I would tell my students, I would explain to them, here's what's going on, and they would start to pick it up. And then later on, they would come to me and they said, Mr. Goldsmith, you were talking about this years ago. I was like, yeah, and they're like, yeah, I picked up on it. A buddy, now a friend of mine, an old student of mine, ended up interning for the Mises Institute, and he's studying economics now, and he's now writing for the American Conservative, and he's a pro-peace advocate. And he picked up these seeds because he looked into the information, and it's really remarkable. And there are a ton of things that aren't even getting discussed. I know, Angela, you've got a couple stories that maybe you want to mention to people just now to put on their radar that you've been watching, and you go back and forth between the East and the West Coast. Anything you want to mention to the audience right now that they might want to look into more?
Everything about Israel affects everything you're doing right now, whether you're in LA. Karen Bass essentially allowed LAPD to basically outlaw demonstrations. Okay, if you're in Florida right now, which is where I am from, where South Florida begins, Ron DeSantis, BDS is outlawed here. So that's amazing. It's just even that you can actually outlaw boycott, divestment sanction. In other words, you can basically outlaw thought here.
Yeah.
When you force people to sell Israeli products, and I just wanted to get that in time for people who tune out and think, well, this doesn't matter to me so much. And I know you're coming to the top of the hour, but just definitely understand that everything you do involves civil liberties and the Constitution and the Fed. None of those things don't affect you.
Yeah, absolutely. Angela, if I could, before I go, I want to sort of assign myself some work, because you mentioned Karen Bass, and I've been looking at a couple other facets of the Karen Bass story. If I can touch base with you, I'd like to talk about that a little bit more, about Karen Bass and the suppression of dissent in California, in particular, Karen Bass and the political influence of the Israeli bloc there. And then, of course, Ron DeSantis. He's got so many black marks against him. He looks like a piece of bruised flesh, because he obviously has been the plaything of the Israelis for years, whether it's, going to Israel to get legislation passed that basically bans dissent on college campuses or gives a harsher penalty to people if they spray paint a building, but they're accused of being anti-Semitic, which if you were just to say, I hate the state, and somebody says, well, Israel is a state, then that could be accused of being anti-Semitic. Just the generic idea of being an anarchist now could be called anti-Semitic. I'd like to discuss in particular the Bass story a little bit more. And I'll contact you on the back side of this if I get the opportunity. If you can feed me any of the little nuggets of information, I'll do some more investigating myself. And I'd love to be able to, obviously an easier ride for me because you're already on top of some of these things and you're watching some of this stuff, and love to get some more of the thoughts from you when the opportunity arises.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait to be back on to do a lot of shameless promotion.
Well, shameless promotion is A-OK for peace advocates and a person like you. And Angela, I got to say, it was one of the best times I've ever had hanging out with you up at PorcFest. Stefan Molyneux sitting over there. We're at the table and watching some of the people giving speeches at what was that? It was sort of like the speaker's corner thing that they had, and it was a blast. I wish we could have you back in New Hampshire all the time, Angela. It'd be great.
Well, I miss everybody there too. So much peace and love, and you have a great night.
All right. You take care, Angela. Have an awesome time, and I'll text you after the show, okay?
Okay.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Angela Keaton, everybody, Executive Director of AntiWarDotCom. Check her out. Check out their work, and please follow Kyle's show and see what they've got going on. We'll just show you the background for AntiWarDotCom. You can see the staff, CEO, Eric Garris, Executive Director, Angela Keaton, Scott Horton, Editorial Director, and so on. So there you go. Good people all the way around. Solid all the way.